Well, hello everybody. Welcome. Listen, I have something to tell you. Some of you asked. When I was a little boy, I sat absolutely enthralled every Easter morning by the reading of the resurrection of Jesus. I was absolutely fascinated that all four of the Gospels in Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, they all describe the events of that momentous morning just a little bit differently. And it was quite apparent to me, even as a little boy at a tender age, that in actual fact, if they were that bit different, it was because they were describing something so momentous that it couldn't possibly be encapsulated within a single account. And I made a vow right there in that church that I would get to the bottom of what really happened on that far distant morning. I knew that it was stupendous, something of incredible significance. And little did I realise that 50 years later, the Garden Tomb Association in Jerusalem were to ask me to make their official film on the site of those events. Well, it is an absolutely stunning story. And we just have to remember what John says in his Gospel. John says that very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene set out to the tomb. She was bearing spices with which to complete the burial rites for Jesus, whom she'd seen buried there just on the Friday before. And she looked up and she saw that the stone had been rolled away from the tomb. So she went running back to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and she said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb and I don't know where they've put him." Well, not surprisingly, Peter and John, the other disciple, they set off for the tomb. And they both ran, and we can visualise them doing so. And it was the other disciple who got there first. And he stooped and he looked into the tomb. And he saw the linen cloths lying there where the body of Jesus had lain. But he didn't go in. And then, of course, dear old Peter came running up, puffing and panting, we presume, and he went straight into the tomb. And he too saw the linen cloths lying where the body of Jesus had lain, and also the piece that had been round his head lying not with the linen cloths, but just that little distance apart from them. And then the other disciple, he went into the tomb and he saw and believed. For as yet they didn't realise or understand the scripture which said that Jesus must rise from the dead. And then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Well, by this time, Mary had arrived back at the tomb, still weeping. And as she wept, she looked into the tomb and she saw two angels sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet of where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said, "Because they've taken my Lord out of the tomb and I don't know where they've put him." Her grief must have been absolutely stupendous. And saying that, she turned round and she saw Jesus standing there. But she didn't realise that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" She imagined he was the gardener. She said, "Sir, if you've taken him away, tell me where you put him and I will go and fetch him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and cried out in Hebrew, "Rabboni." It means, "My dearest, dearest teacher." And Jesus said to her, "Don't cling on to me, because I've not yet ascended to my Father. But you go and tell my brothers that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God." And Mary Magdalene went back and she told the disciples, "I've seen the Lord." And she told them that he'd said these things to her. Well, I think you can begin to understand now just how deep an impression that was to make on me all those years ago. And it's remained just as vivid ever since. So I'm just going to take you over to the garden of tomb right now for just the tiniest little extract so you can get a feel of what it might have been like. According to Matthew's Gospel, Joseph was a rich man himself. There's no doubt that it's here at the garden tomb that we can really begin to visualise the events of that momentous morning. It all fits so perfectly with the vivid description in the Bible. There's a skull hill, a cultivated area and an appropriate tomb, all just outside the wall of Jesus' day. So it was into Joseph of Arimathea's garden, in the early light of dawn, that the women were to make their way on that stupendous morning. Who will roll the stone away, they'd wondered. But it had already gone. The tomb was empty. Mary Magdalene immediately fled back to Peter and John. "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they've put him." The other women appear to have lingered longer. The grave clothes were still intact, but the body of Jesus was gone. Suddenly, the dazzling light of two angels. "Why are you looking for the living in the place of the dead? He's not here. He's risen as he said." Shortly afterwards, Mary Magdalene was to return, and possibly right here, or outside such a tomb as this, Jesus himself was to appear to her. The Lord of life, the conqueror of death, declared with power to be the Son of God by the resurrection from the dead, as the Apostle Paul was later to describe it.